Most Americans don't feel poor. They're still working, still paying their bills, still doing everything they were told to do. And yet, life feels harder every single year. Not because of one big disaster, but because everything around them is quietly becoming unsustainable. This video isn't about a recession. It's about why the middle-class lifestyle itself is starting to break. For most of American history, the middle class was built on a simple idea. If you worked full-time, showed up every day, and played by the rules, life would slowly get better. That promise didn't require luxury. It didn't mean getting rich. It meant stability. Today, many people still have jobs. They're employed. They're productive. On paper, everything looks fine. But something fundamental has changed. Wages haven't collapsed, they've stalled. Raises still happen, but they no longer keep pace with the cost of living. Each year, a little more of your paycheck disappears before you even have a chance to save it. At the same time, work itself has become less secure. Jobs that once offered long-term stability now feel temporary. Layoffs arrive without warning. Restructuring has become routine. Entire departments can vanish overnight, even in companies that are still profitable. For many middle-class workers, the fear isn't unemployment. It's instability. People aren't asking, "Will I lose my job tomorrow?" They're asking, "If something goes wrong, will I be okay?" And increasingly, the answer is no. Benefits are thinner. Healthcare costs are higher. Pensions have disappeared. What used to be safety nets are now individual responsibilities. The result is a strange new reality. You can be working harder than ever, earning more than you did 5 years ago, and still feel like you're falling behind. Not because you failed, but because the system quietly shifted underneath you. The middle class wasn't destroyed in a single moment. It's being worn down, one paycheck at a time. The middle class didn't suddenly become unaffordable because of one massive bill. It happened more quietly than that. The real pressure comes from accumulation. Housing didn't double overnight. Rent crept up year after year. Property taxes adjusted slightly every cycle. Insurance premiums rose, then rose again. Individually, each increase felt manageable. Together, they changed everything. Groceries are a perfect example. There was no single moment when food became expensive. Prices just never went back down. You still buy the same things. You still shop at the same stores. But every trip costs a little more than the last one. Utilities follow the same pattern. Electric bills fluctuate. Water rates adjust. Internet and phone plans add fees instead of raising prices directly. Nothing feels dramatic until you add it all up. Transportation used to be predictable. Now car insurance jumps without explanation. Maintenance costs rise with parts and labor shortages. Even owning a paid-off car no longer guarantees low monthly expenses. And healthcare might be the most deceptive cost of all. You may still have insurance. You may still be covered. But deductibles are higher. Out-of-pocket costs are larger. And one unexpected medical issue can erase months of savings. What makes this especially dangerous is that none of it feels like a crisis at first. You don't panic. You adjust. You delay purchases. You cut back on small comforts. You tell yourself it's temporary. But temporary becomes permanent. Savings slow, then stop. Emergency funds shrink. Retirement contributions get paused, just for now. The middle class doesn't collapse from a single shock. It erodes from constant pressure. And when everything costs more at the same time, there's nowhere left to compensate. Not because people are reckless, but because the math no longer works the way it used to. For a long time, debt was framed as a personal failure, a sign of poor discipline or bad decisions. That framing no longer fits reality. Today, debt isn't taken on because people want more. It's taken on because they're trying to stay even. Credit cards don't pay for luxury anymore. They cover groceries, gas, medical copays, unexpected repairs. The average household isn't using debt to get ahead. They're using it to avoid falling behind. And the system quietly encourages this behavior. Buy now, pay later becomes normal. Minimum payments replace real progress. Balances roll forward month after month. Interest compounds quietly in the background, while wages struggle to keep pace. Student loans are no longer an investment with a clear payoff. For many, they're a permanent deduction from future income. Mortgages stretch budgets thinner than ever before. People buy smaller homes, farther away, for higher monthly payments than previous generations paid for much more. And once debt becomes structural, escape becomes difficult. A single missed paycheck, one medical bill, one emergency. That's all it takes to push a household from managing to trapped. This is why so many middle-class families feel anxious even when they're technically employed and insured. They're not failing, they're leveraged. And leverage works both ways until it doesn't. When debt becomes the foundation instead of a tool, stability turns fragile. Not overnight, but inevitably. For generations, working harder was supposed to reduce risk. More hours meant more security. More responsibility meant more stability. That relationship has quietly flipped. Today, the people who are most exposed aren't those on the margins. They're the ones with the most to lose. Higher incomes often come with higher fixed costs, bigger mortgages, more expensive healthcare plans, higher insurance premiums, property taxes that rise automatically. What once felt like progress now increases vulnerability. A promotion doesn't just raise income. It locks families into a more expensive version of life, one that's harder to step away from if things change. At the same time, work itself has become less forgiving. Remote flexibility can disappear overnight. Companies restructure constantly. Loyalty no longer guarantees protection. Many middle-class workers are now in roles that demand long hours, constant availability, and emotional burnout without long-term security in return. And when the workload increases, something else disappears. Time. Time to manage finances. Time to comparison shop. Time to recover from mistakes. Small inefficiencies become expensive. Missed details turn into fees. Burnout turns into medical costs. The irony is that the system now places the greatest pressure on those doing everything right. They're employed. They're responsible. They're contributing. But the margin for error is gone. One disruption, a layoff, an illness, a family emergency can undo years of careful planning. Not because people were reckless, but because modern middle-class life leaves no room to breathe. Working harder doesn't guarantee safety anymore. It often just means you have more to protect and more to lose. For a long time, moving was the solution. If a city became too expensive, people left. If jobs disappeared, they relocated. If life felt tight, there was always somewhere cheaper, calmer, or more manageable. That option is disappearing. Today, when people move, they're not escaping pressure, they're often just trading one set of problems for another. Cheaper cities usually mean lower wages. Lower housing costs are offset by higher transportation expenses, weaker healthcare access, or fewer job options. What looks affordable on paper can feel far more fragile in real life. Even places that once absorbed newcomers easily are struggling to keep up. Infrastructure lags behind population growth. Insurance costs rise faster in high-risk areas. Local governments raise fees to cover growing shortfalls. And then there are the hidden costs. Homeownership comes with assessments, maintenance, and taxes that don't show up in listings. Renting brings volatility, renewal shocks, and sudden policy changes. In many areas, both options now carry long-term uncertainty. What makes this shift so disorienting is that people are still being told to move somewhere cheaper. But cheaper no longer means safer. It often means fewer buffers, fewer services, less resilience when something goes wrong. For the middle class, moving used to be a way to regain control. Now, It can feel like starting over without the guarantees previous generations had. The problem isn't that people are choosing the wrong cities. It's that the system no longer offers many right ones. And when relocation stops being a solution, the pressure doesn't disappear. It settles right into everyday life. This isn't a story about failure, and it isn't about bad choices. Most middle-class families did exactly what they were told to do. They worked hard. They stayed employed. They planned carefully. What changed wasn't their effort, it was the environment around them. The system didn't collapse. It just stopped providing margin. Life still functions. Bills still get paid. Jobs still exist. But there's less room for error, less protection against shocks, and far more pressure on people who used to feel secure. Understanding this doesn't fix everything, but it does change how you see your own situation. When life feels harder, it isn't always because you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's because the rules changed quietly and no one told you. And as those pressures continue to build, the most important question isn't where you live or how hard you work. It's whether the system you're navigating was ever designed to last.